Welcome back, everyone. It is good to see you all. Important topic. Fall has fallen. I don't think that's a phrase that I just used. Fall has fallen. Let's talk about storing your boat for the winter, assuming you're not paddling through the winter. This is a super common question. I see it on Reddit pretty frequently. People email me questions about storing boats. So let's talk about sort of best, good enough, not optimal, but probably what Brett does. Let's talk about those things. Let's get right into it. Let's go. Okay, so let's get right into it. What is the best way to store your kayak for the winter? Without a doubt, the way to do this is indoors, temperature controlled, clean, and covered. Let's take a look at what that looks like. So this is probably optimal, right? Is indoors, hanging in straps in an environmentally controlled way, meaning it's not getting wet, it's not getting rained on, it's not getting snowed on, it's not getting extremes of cold or heat. I guess it wouldn't be heat if you're storing it for the winter, but you know what I'm saying. This is also a good time to clean your boat thoroughly. My boat gets very dirty, and this is the time of year when I'm gonna clean it. It's really best just to do this with a hose and soapy water, but it's cold here. I don't wanna break out a hose, so I'm gonna do my best to clean this. It's also a good time to use 303 on rubber components. 303 is this stuff. It is an aerospace protectant that you can use to clean all sorts of things. I have no idea what that is from. That's a little scary. I'm going to give this a quick cleaning first. That is looking way better. Now let's hit it with some 303. Probably too much. And I'll tell you, that just pops on way easier with just a little 303. For the Delta, you can also use the Novus system to clean scratches and stuff like that. But this is a good time to get your boat nice and clean. And I've got it hanging in these stands that I built last year out of like scrap lumber and some cordage. Ideally, if I were doing this again and like wasn't in a hurry and wasn't building it from stuff I had, I would use probably 2-inch wide webbing stapled here. So this is in a slightly wider hang. And then another thing that you can do with this is you want these are not actually where they should be now that I'm looking at it. I pulled this in here kind of quickly. So let's put these where they should be. Ooh, there is water in there. That needs to come out of there. So all I did to make these right was to slide these homemade stands so that they're closer or pretty close to under the bulkheads. That is where the boat is the strongest. Now, this is something interesting I just discovered. So frequently when I shoot a video like this, I'll do a quick Google search. I'll sort of see what people are saying, make sure I'm not missing something major. Because like I do things for decades that may or may not be right. They're just what I've always done. And I was pleasantly surprised to see that most of the things that I do to store my boat over the winter is correct, is the way that people say to do it. They do talk about storing the boat more on its side. Because the boat is stronger in that orientation. And I'm fine with that. If you want to put the boat on something so that it's on its side, I would just make sure that it's resting on something soft. The boat is definitely stronger than that. The other thing that I saw online, and this was AI driven, was to store the boat upside down. I see no reason to do that. The boat is designed to be in a certain orientation, which is hull down, deck up. And I think that that's a better way to do it. I don't want to put that wear and tear on the deck, I'd much rather put it on the hull where it's supposed to be. So I'm not quite sure why it says that. If you have input on why it should be stored upside down, let me know down in the comments. But I don't see any real reason. I've always stored boats upright on something soft, as close to the bulkheads as possible. So in reading that AI overview, it says clean it, elevate it off the ground on a rack or a sawhorse. Sawhorse is definitely a bad idea unless it's very well padded. Place it upside down to prevent hull warping. I have no idea why the boat's hull would warp if it was right side up. I think the deck is more likely, I mean, depending on what your boat is made out of, I think your deck is more likely to deform than your hull is. Now, I would absolutely, even though this boat is indoors, make sure the inside of the boat is completely dry, which this boat still needs. It's a little bit wet, and it needs to still really be cleaned. But I would absolutely store this with a cockpit cover on and the hatches in place. Unless you're worried about stretching out your hatches with these, I'm not that worried about it. But if you have just like a neoprene hatch, you might want to remove that hatch completely, or a big rubber hatch like the Wilderness Systems boat used, so that they're not stretched out completely. They'll stay tighter on the boat and they'll do a better job. With these, I'm not that worried about them. They've been on for a long time, and I'm not really seeing any issues. I've had deltas pretty much since the beginning, and I've seen at least 3 or 4 different sort of hatch designs. The current ones are by far the best, and they hold up really well. Far better than the originals, which sealed really well, but about every year you had to replace them, which is problematic. So inside, supported by something soft, hanging or resting with the weight close to the bulkheads, in a temperature-controlled environment like I've... So what you just saw is probably my biggest complaint with the Insta360 Ace Pro. I inadvertently put my hand out, which stopped the camera. I didn't realize this at the time, and so kept on talking, and none of it was recorded. I'm not quite sure how I missed it. Between the audible beep and the visible flashing light on the camera, I somehow just completely missed it. So what I was saying was that ideally, you're in a temperature-controlled environment. Critters can't get in, all those things. But you may have noticed in the video already, I have a problem with that, which is my boat doesn't fit in my garage. So let's see the next option. Far less ideal, but still workable. And a lot of times the only thing you can do is storing your boat outside. I've once again got it in these homemade stands. I wouldn't use things like sawhorses because they're hard, but as I said, you can build this for just a few dollars, and it actually works really well. There are a million options. I can't count how many different outdoor racks that I've built for storing boats. Ideally, they should be covered. The same rules apply. Clean them really well inside and out, and then absolutely put a cockpit cover over it. If you don't have a cockpit cover, or if you want to store it with, say, cockpit cover on but hatches off, buy that, like, I don't know what it's called, industrial grade saran wrap, and I would wrap the entire boat. I would wrap the hatch covers. If I didn't do the entire boat, I would wrap the rudder assembly, just so that the elements aren't getting to it, and make sure this is covered. I don't want critters in here. I don't want insects in here. I don't want someone making a nest in here. I certainly don't want water in here. I saw once a Delta that was stored outside. Water ended up in the cockpit, and then it froze, and when it expanded, it popped the seat out. So it needed to be repaired. That was a boat that was owned by a friend of mine, but he stored it in my backyard, and he stored it without a cockpit cover. I said to him a bunch of times, hey, you should get a cockpit cover on this, and he never got around to it. I ended up repairing that boat and taking it to Alaska, and it did really well. But without a doubt, you don't want water in here that can then freeze. So this is a nice option. This works pretty well. You could cover it with a tarp. There are a lot of options. Yes, it's not ideal in terms of wear and tear. It's not ideal in terms of UV light. But like me, if you don't have a space where you can fit a boat inside, sometimes it's the best you can do. It is, however, not what I do. So what I do is less than ideal. If you're new here, you may not know it, but my boat lives on the roof of my van 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And part of that is that I don't have space to store it. Part of that is that I keep the boat on the roof of the van and all my paddling gear in the van all year long, because I never know when I'm going to have the opportunity to paddle. And when I have the opportunity to paddle, I do my best to take it. So for instance, last year I taught a wilderness first aid course in Fishkill, New York. I knew I was going to be crossing the Hudson and was like, you know what? I'm going to put a boat in the water on Friday afternoon before I get to the venue and have to work. And it was a really nice way to start the weekend. It was also November. A normal human might not want to do that in New York State. I knew that I had the gear. I knew that I had the experience. Honestly, the day that I was there, the wind was really howling. And I was, of course, on a river, so I had current. I didn't paddle for that long. I paddled for about an hour, hour and a half. It wasn't the paddle I planned, but it was really nice, and I really enjoy having that opportunity. So my boat lives on the roof of my van. Now, I'd like to add that when my boats just lived outside, they were getting UV exposure. They were getting snowed on, rained on. Even my dogs jumped on them frequently. This is not an ideal way to store your kayak, but you got to do what you got to do, and my boats have always held up well. Not only have I stored boats, I've stored stand-up paddleboards outside. I've had friends' boats who lived in my backyard. It's not ideal. Yes, I'm sure my boat has aged more than a boat that lived its life indoors. I probably have to replace things like bungees and such more often. There's nothing else I can do. I don't have an indoor space. I wish I had an indoor space big enough for all this and boat storage and bike storage and all that stuff, but I just don't have it. I like having the ability to get in my boat anytime I want. I don't love the fact that my boat lives its life outdoors, but this is life. You can also store your boat like in your garage if you've got the space. There are all sorts of systems for like raising it to the ceiling or hanging it from a wall. Just make sure it's really well padded so you're not putting, an inch worth of pressure on one spot in the hull for 6 months. I would also check your boat throughout the winter, whether it's indoors or out. Make sure nothing is leaking, making sure it's in good shape, making sure nothing needs repair. The winter will really take a toll on your boat. It's winter is when I have issues with the rudder on the roof of my boat, in terms of the clip will break or the wind will grab it and knock it all out of whack. I've never actually broken anything. You definitely see wear and tear on things like the rudder, which is exposed. And frequently, if it is really brutal winter and I know that I'm not going to be paddling for a while, I'll wrap the rudder system on the back of the boat with that same sort of industrial saran wrap stuff. That stuff is amazing and works really well. You can use to clean all sorts of things. I have no idea what that is. Okay, so that is 3 ways to store your boat for the winter. Make sure it's clean, make sure it's dry, make sure it's covered, protect it from UV, protect it from critters. There you go. That's everything you need to know in a nutshell. Don't do what I do, which is store my boat on the roof of my van all winter. If you can, store it someplace warm and dry. That's what your boat likes. Really, what you should be doing, though, is paddling all year. I hope you found this helpful. I hope you're really paddling all winter and not putting your boat away for the winter, but based on where you live, that might not be possible. If you have questions or comments, put them down below. Do me a favor, hit like, hit subscribe, hit hype. I don't know if that hype button does anything, but yeah, hit the hype button for me. You can support this channel by buying me a coffee on Ko-fi. Links are down below. My gear list is there. My books are there. Risk management stuff is there. The guides way is there. 120 something tips and tricks from a lifetime as an outdoor guide and instructor. Check those out. I'm super proud of them. I don't talk about them enough. I need to talk about them more. Otherwise, I'll see you outside, hopefully on the water this winter.